Carl wasn't the kind of man people noticed right away. He wore the same faded jeans, oil-stained shirts, and work boots every day. His hands were rough, his face tired, and his smile rare, but real. In a small town where most people rush through life, Carl moved slowly with purpose. He wasn't rich, but he always found a way to give. Whether it was fixing a neighbor's car for free or offering a ride on a cold morning. He had run the same little mechanic shop for over 10 years. Nothing fancy, just a single bay, a rusty sign, and a coffee pot that barely worked. Business was slow, especially in the winter. Some days he'd fix more things in his own shop than for customers. Still, Carl never raised his prices. He believed in fairness. If someone couldn't pay right away, he wrote their name on a notebook not to shame them, but to remember they trusted him. His trailer sat behind the garage, quiet and simple. No wife, no kids. Just old records, a recliner that squeaked, and a collection of classic car magazines he read by a dim lamp. Loneliness had become normal. He'd lost his parents in his early 20s and never had much of a chance to dream. Life became about working, paying bills, and trying not to fall behind. But somehow he held on to a softness, an instinct to care, even when nobody cared back. People in town respected Carl, even if they didn't fully see him. He was the guy who showed up with jumper cables in the snow. The one who didn't talk much at church, but always stayed behind to stack chairs. He never expected anything in return. And maybe that's what made what happened next so unexpected. It had been raining since early morning. The kind of cold, steady rain that soaked everything and made the whole town feel quieter than usual. Carl had just locked up the garage for the day, shoulders hunched under his worn-out jacket. He started his old truck, ready to head home, when he caught something strange out of the corner of his eye. A woman, sitting alone at the bus stop, dressed in white. At first, he thought maybe his eyes were playing tricks on him. But as he looked again, it was clear. She was wearing a wedding dress. The lace clung to her arms, now damp from the rain. Her makeup was smudged, and her hair stuck to her face. She wasn't just cold. She looked lost, like someone whose whole world had cracked in a single moment. Carl sat there for a second, hand frozen on the steering wheel. It wasn't his business, and he didn't know her. But something didn't feel right. Cars passed by without stopping, and no one seemed to care. He knew that feeling all too well, being invisible when you need someone the most. So he pulled over, stepped out, and quietly walked toward her. She didn't look up at first, just stared at the sidewalk like she was waiting for something that wasn't coming. Carl gently cleared his throat and asked if she was okay. Her eyes met his, red from crying, confused, but not afraid. She didn't speak, but she didn't run either. That silence between them said enough. So Carl said the only thing he could think of, "You don't have to sit out here in the rain." Carl didn't say much as they walked to his trailer behind the garage. He offered her a dry towel, a blanket, and the seat closest to the space heater. She still hadn't told him her name, and he didn't ask. Instead, he cracked a few eggs, made toast, and placed the plate in front of her without a word. It wasn't much, but it was warm, and for now that was enough. She ate slowly, holding back tears between each bite. Carl sat across the room, pretending to read an old magazine, giving her space. Every few minutes, he'd glance up to make sure she was okay. When she finished eating, he pointed to the small couch in the corner and said, "You can sleep there tonight. I'll be in the garage if you need anything." Then he left her alone. By morning, the whispers had started. A few people saw her leave the bus stop and follow Carl to the back of the shop. The diner across the street was buzzing. Some folks thought he'd lost his mind. Others said it wasn't right for a man to take in a woman like that. But Carl didn't listen. He knew small towns loved to talk, and he also knew their words couldn't touch what he felt was the right thing to do. Carl didn't want anything from her. No explanations. No thanks. Just the quiet comfort of knowing she wasn't out in the cold. He fixed up a small tray of breakfast and left it by the couch before heading to the garage to work. She stayed silent, but something in the way she folded the blanket that morning told him. She knew. And maybe, for the first time in a long while, she felt safe. She stayed one night, then another. Carl didn't ask questions. He just kept making simple meals and leaving clean towels on the arm of the couch. Eventually, she started helping around the trailer, folding laundry, sweeping the floor, washing dishes without being asked. They barely spoke at first, but there was a quiet rhythm forming. Two people under the same roof learning how not to feel alone. One evening, over canned chili and saltine crackers, she finally opened up. Her name was Rachel. She had been left at the altar just hours before Carl found her. Her fiancé vanished, phone off, no explanation. Her parents had passed years ago. No siblings. No one came looking for her. "I didn't know where else to go," she said softly, not meeting his eyes. Carl just nodded. Later that week, as they sat on the porch watching the rain, Carl shared his own story. How he lost his mom in a car accident when he was 20, and his dad to cancer just 2 years later. How he dropped out of school to keep the garage running, even though he once dreamed of becoming an engineer. Life didn't go the way he hoped, but he made peace with it. "You survive," he said. "And some days that has to be enough." It wasn't a dramatic bond. No grand confessions or emotional breakdowns. Just quiet understanding. The kind of connection built not on words, but on presence. They didn't try to fix each other. They simply listened. And in that silence, something rare began to grow. Respect, trust, and the kind of comfort that doesn't demand anything in return. Rachel didn't plan on staying long. But one morning, while Carl was out back working on an old pickup, she swept the front of the garage and wiped down the counters. Then she organized a few tools, straightened the old coffee station, and made a hand-painted open sign for the front window. When Carl came in and saw it, he didn't say much, just smiled a little and nodded. Something had shifted. Started small. Rachel offered to run to the parts store, then called a couple of local shops to ask if they needed oil changes. She added a little chalkboard outside with the day's specials. Soon, people began noticing. Customers stayed longer, chatted more. Some even brought their cars in just to say hi and see who the new girl at Carl's was. The shop, once so quiet, began to buzz again. Carl didn't know how to describe it, but the place felt lighter. Rachel had a way of making things look better without changing who they were. She never acted like she was saving anything. She just helped. She brought coffee for early customers, made the waiting area feel warm, and reminded Carl to smile once in a while. Her energy wasn't loud, but it filled the room. With time, business picked up. Word spread that Carl's garage was running smoother than ever. Rachel didn't fix engines, but she fixed a lot more than that. Relationships with old clients, systems that had fallen apart, and even Carl's tired hope. They didn't call it a plan. They just kept showing up day after day, doing the work together. And slowly, the shop became more than just a place to survive. It became a second chance. One afternoon, as Carl adjusted a carburetor in the bay, a sleek black car pulled up outside the garage. Rachel was inside folding rags when the door opened and froze. It was him, her ex-fiancé, wearing a sharp suit and sunglasses, like he had just stepped out of a different world. He walked in with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We need to talk," he said. Carl quietly stepped into the background. The conversation happened behind closed doors, but the tension lingered in the air. Rachel looked shaken afterward, her hands clenched, her voice low. He wanted her back. Claimed he'd made a mistake. Said he had been scared, not ready. Now, he promised change. Said he realized what she meant to him. Carl didn't interrupt. He just kept working, eyes on the engine, heart heavy. Later that evening, Carl took a walk down the gravel path behind the trailer. Rachel caught up with him, silent at first. He turned to her and spoke with quiet honesty. "You don't owe me anything. You should go if that's what you want. You deserve more than this garage. More than a man like me." His voice cracked slightly. He meant it. Not out of pity, out of respect. He was willing to let her go. Rachel didn't answer right away. She just looked at him for a long moment, eyes filled with something unreadable. Then she turned and walked back toward the trailer. Carl stayed there alone, watching the sky fade into dusk. For the first time since she arrived, he felt the weight of emptiness again, but also peace. Because love, he figured, meant wanting what was best for someone, even if it wasn't you. The next morning, Rachel stood outside the garage, arms crossed against the cool breeze, as the black car pulled in one last time. Her ex stepped out with hope in his eyes, but she met him calmly. There was no anger in her voice, just clarity. "I'm not going back," she said. "I'm not the same person I was when you left me." Her words were steady. She wasn't running anymore. She was choosing. She explained that it wasn't about revenge or proving anything. It was about the peace she'd found in the quiet mornings at the shop, in greasy hands and shared meals, in the way Carl listened without trying to fix her. "This place, this life, it may be simple, but it's real," she said. Her ex tried one last plea, but she gently shook her head. It was already decided in her heart. Carl didn't hear the conversation, but he saw the goodbye. Rachel walked back slowly, wiping a tear from her cheek. Carl looked at her from the garage doorway, unsure of what to say. Before he could speak, she just smiled and said, "I'm not leaving." He stared for a second, almost not believing it. Then he nodded quietly, as if letting himself feel hope again. They didn't hug or kiss, not yet. That wasn't their way. Instead, they got back to work. Rachel swept the floor. Carl went back to fixing a busted alternator. But everything felt different now. The choice had been made, not out of pressure, not from desperation, but from love built quietly, day by day. And that made all the difference. With the past behind them, Carl and Rachel began shaping something new. What started as a small garage became a place people felt drawn to. It was Rachel's idea to offer free car checks for single moms, just once a month. But word spread fast. People in town took notice. Some came for the service, others just stopped by to say thanks. Carl had always been good with his hands, but Rachel brought the vision. She organized Saturday events for teens, teaching basic car skills and offering snacks. For a town with little to do, it made a difference. Kids who once loitered outside now showed up with purpose. They weren't just fixing engines, they were fixing trust. And that changed everything. Loyal customers came next. Folks appreciated honest work, fair prices, and the kindness that filled the shop like grease in the air. The waiting area was cleaned up, painted, even got a coffee machine. Rachel handled the books. Carl taught apprentices. They didn't talk about success much, but you could feel it. The business was alive, and so were they. At night, after the last car rolled out, they'd sit on the porch out back with tired hands and full hearts. No champagne, no speeches, just quiet smiles and the sound of wind through trees. It wasn't the life either of them expected, but somehow it was better. Side by side, they had turned a failing garage into a space of hope. And their bond? It was no longer just survival, it was something deeper. Carl never planned to be known. He didn't post online, didn't seek attention. He just kept fixing cars, treating people right, and doing what he could with what little he had. But one afternoon, a customer snapped a photo. A young mom wiping tears as Carl handed her car keys and said, "No charge today." The picture quietly made its way to the local paper. The article called him the humble mechanic with a heart. Rachel read it aloud over dinner, laughing at how they described the garage like it was some kind of miracle. Carl just shook his head. He didn't think he'd done anything special. But the next day, people started stopping by. Not for repairs, but to donate tools, tires, even coffee and food for the kids' events. Soon, a small regional news station picked up the story. Then a national one. Letters arrived from all over. Thank yous, donations, stories from people who'd been in tough spots and found hope through Carl's example. He was overwhelmed. He never asked for praise. But somehow, his quiet way of living spoke louder than any headline ever could. Through it all, Carl stayed the same. He wore the same oil-stained cap, worked the same long hours, and still let customers pay what they could. His humility didn't just gain attention. It became the reason people trusted him. In a world loud with self-promotion, his silence was strength. And that strength changed more than just his life. It started changing the town. They never bought a mansion or drove luxury cars. Their bank account was modest, but their lives were full. The garage wasn't just a business anymore. It was a second home for many. Teenagers who once hung out on street corners came by to help after school. Single parents found not just car repairs, but people who cared. Carl and Rachel had unknowingly built something bigger than themselves. Every night, they closed the shop together, sharing quiet dinners in the tiny apartment upstairs. No grand vacations, no expensive clothes. Just peace, laughter, a rhythm they never imagined when they first met. Her in a wedding dress, him under a car hood. They didn't need wealth to feel rich. They had trust, respect, and a bond that grew from simple moments. Rachel found something more valuable than what she'd lost. A place where she mattered. Carl no longer felt like just a man fixing broken engines. He felt seen, valued, and deeply connected. Together, they turned hurt into healing, silence into purpose, and hard work into legacy. The real breakthrough wasn't a number in a bank account. It was the life they built from scratch. Their story is proof that second chances don't always come with fireworks. Sometimes, they come with grease-stained hands, soft words, and a heart open enough to try again. And in that, they found everything they ever needed.